Today we're going to talk about 1 Peter, which was written by Peter, who was one of Jesus's closest friends. At one point, Jesus looks at him and goes, "Peter, you're a rock. On you, I'm going to build my church." So Peter's writing from Rome, probably during the time where Nero was leading. And Nero was a crazy guy. I mean, he burned down most of Rome so that he could rebuild it, place the blame on Christians. This was not an easy time to be a follower of Christ. But he's writing from Rome and sending a letter to different groups of Christians that are scattered throughout modern day Turkey. And these Christians are going through a hard time for their faithfulness to Christ. It's hard to follow Jesus. They're getting harassed. They're getting persecuted. So he writes to encourage them. So how the letter breaks down is it begins with an opening greeting and then a song of praise. And in that song of praise, Peter talks about how they're a new family, which is incredible language to hold on to. He talks about how they have a new identity and how they have a new hope. From here, it really breaks down to three major sections. So starting in chapter 1, verse 13 through chapter 2, verse 10, it's showing that new family and who we are. He picks up on this Old Testament language of a chosen race, a royal priesthood. And what he wants them to see is that they are the new Israel. They're the new people of God. He wants them to know who they are and to operate not for an identity, but from their identity. Then the second section starts in chapter 2, verse 11, and goes all the way through chapter 4, verse 11. And that's about suffering. And he shows us how suffering gives us a way to show the world what Jesus is like. And so when we properly understand persecution, we can actually face it head on in such a way that people get to see Jesus. So that should be, that relates to the way that we operate as citizens under a government. It operates through relationships like between a wife and a husband. And this is just an awesome way for us to show or know what Jesus went through when he suffered on our behalf. So it also helps us to identify with Jesus. Then the third and final section in chapter 4, verse 12 through 5:11 is all about our future hope. And when he starts talking about our future hope, he reminds us of the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. When Jesus talks about persecution, we shouldn't be surprised when following Jesus gets hard or when people from the outside begin to push in because of who we are in Christ. Then he challenges church leaders, and he talks about how the church needs to be proactive in caring for those who are suffering for their faith. And then he wraps it up by reminding us that this is much bigger than what we can see in the physical realm. There's something deeply spiritual about Christians being persecuted for their faith. So he reminds us of Satan's activity behind the scenes and how Satan wants to destroy us. But I love the letter of 1 Peter because it's so relevant for us today. It's getting harder to follow Jesus in our culture. And what we see in 1 Peter is a way for us to live. When it gets hard to follow Jesus, our response shouldn't be to go into hiding, to create a Christian compound to protect ourselves from the world. It's not about turning our shoulder. Instead of walking away or pulling away from a world that's hostile towards Christ, Peter shows us how we can step into that type of world, live faithfully for God, and show the world what Jesus is like. It's a great letter. I hope you guys enjoy.